Hello and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. I'm Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says.
And my name is Ollie, I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh, it's fresh with a PH.
We have to start this episode the same way we have several past episodes, with a disclaimer. Please don't think that this is a good show from what we are about to say. This is season 4. It is tricking you. But both of these episodes are pretty iconic, pretty groundbreaking. When I realized it was these two episodes we were going to be talking about, I was like, oh damn, we're really in it now.
And the fact that they're back to back, they're two such iconic episodes. And I'm gonna say something. They're really good. They're really enjoyable and fun until you think about them for more than 50 seconds. Yeah. Because we were texting each other while watching, and I was finding I'm really enjoying watching this, but it's also one of those things where in context, when it was coming out, it was okay, whatever. There are some plot holes here or there that aren't really that big a deal. But if you think about it in the context of how the show progresses and how these characters end up, it's no, what the fuck was going on here?
In the context?
Whoa.
Of all in which you live? Dean Winchester, do you think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Guys, we're recording this before Kamala has announced her vice presidential pick, so if it's Josh Shapiro, we're saying this all negatively.
Yeah. I mean, it's always negatively, but...
If it's Waltz...
or Bashir.
Or Bashir, it's a little less negatively, but still, Anyway, just want you guys to know.
Do you think that Misha Collins will tweet about the VP pick?
I'm sure he will.
God.
I'm sure he will. Anyway, but these are two episodes that's considering the context of the end of the show, they are just deeply weird.
Yeah.
But in the moment, they're pretty enjoyable. And I think as we go through them, we will get into a little bit more of no, wait a minute. Why did this character do this?
There's also a couple moments of oh, wait, I'm sad knowing the context.
Oh, absolutely. These episodes are low-key heartbreaking.
Also, Castiel does return to us this week, and there are some moments. I apologize for us.
It is one of the spiciest. It's a little spicy. They're still kind of figuring out if they're enemies or not, and it's ooh, enemies. This is giving enemies to lovers in a really interesting way.
Okay, but let's discuss. Dean and Castiel are enemies to lovers. Who has the vibe of I pulled you out of hell and I could throw you back in? Who has their vibe?
I know that I was clutching my pearls. I'm kind of guys, get a room in this episode.
And you're just why was it written this way? Anyway, we'll get there.
No, but you know what? I know why it was written this way. For me. For me specifically, they wrote it.
For me.
The first episode we're going to talk about, Castiel is not here. I will, spoiler alert, Castiel is not here. That being said, it's a pretty fun one. I think this is definitely one of my favorite Sam episodes.
Yeah, and this is a pretty classic one. There's a lot of good gifts that come from this one. As soon as this one came on, I was like, ooh.
Yeah. There's a lot of fan fictions based on this one.
And let's just say fan fictions of the kind we don't approve of. Fan fictions. We're talking about Wincest, unfortunately. Something that they discuss in the second episode.
I'm going to say something, though. I do think it's funny as shit.
It is funny.
I think also, I have kind of come around recently, in recent times, of, I think that there is a really valid conversation of, shipping versus real-life impact. Because I think that it is really important to say, some things, even though they're fictional, the way that you talk about things online and the way that you interpret them, does have real value in the real world. Nothing exists in a vacuum. But that being said, I'm also kind of whatever.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of funny. So I'm not going to go and tell everyone, you need to stop doing that now.
I don't think you should stop.
Gross,
I just think you're a freak.
That's exactly it. And I'm like, you know what? Free to be you and me. I'm laughing.
I'm laughing.
And I love that.
I think it's hilarious.
And honestly, keep doing it, because I loved it. It's just, it warms my heart to know that there are people who actively ship Wincest and they still exist.
And,
that's culture persevering.
They're like a dying, they're like a dying species.
Yeah, but then they keep like having a resurgence.
Yeah, that's true.
And I love that for them.
I remember,
and this episode is like a very important for a lot of them.
Yeah, this is where we reveal. No.
This is where we reveal that it's like secretly we talk about Destiel all the time, but secretly we're both really into Wincest. So this is season 4, episode 17. It's a Terrible Life. Content warning for this episode: there are some mentions of suicide, so just keep that in mind. So we start, and the song "A Well-Respected Man" by the Kinks is playing, and we see Dean wake up, and he's in this like really nice apartment, and he gets up, he gets out of bed, he starts getting dressed. He has on this bright blue button-down shirt with a white collar and white cuffs and a red tie, and he's wearing like suit pants, and he has on these like fuck-ass suspenders.
He's giving Mad Men, like...
Yeah, he literally is. I'm also like, girl, when was it ever appropriate to wear a blue shirt with like a dark, like a royal blue shirt with white accents, like white collar and cuffs? Like, you look like a fucking idiot. Anyway, that being said, like, he gets up, he's like brushing his teeth, he puts on like a suit jacket, and he makes himself, he has an espresso machine in his house. So he is like foaming a lot, like the milk of a latte.
Like, already you're like, something's wrong. Something's deeply wrong.
Something's not right. So he's like drinking his little coffee, he's wearing his little suit, his hair is also done differently, like it's parted and it looks all neat. And he walks out, and he walks up to the street, and we see like the shot, it's the back of a silver Prius, and Dean gets in. This is his car. It's a silver Prius, and it's 2009, but it had a touchscreen. It's a car with a touchscreen in 2009. He has big money. He's rolling in it. And another hint that something is not right is that Dean turns on the car, and some like classic rock starts playing. I think it was I think it was Hollow by Brian Tichy. I think that's what it was. I think that's what it said in the wiki. But some rock music starts playing, and he makes like kind of a stink face and changes the station to listen to NPR.
And it specifically, is it Morning Edition, or is it was something very specific, and I was like, oh, I know that.
It was definitely like NPR news. I don't recall exactly what, but it was, holy fuck.
I was like, this Dean listens to Fresh Air by Terry Gross. Like,
it was crazy. Just, oh my god. So we see he pulls up to this building, which is called Sandover Bridge and Iron Incorporated. And he walks into the office, and on the office, it says Dean Smith. And he's the director of sales and marketing. And that's like what it says on the, like, on his office, like, wall leading up to it, which is weird. But anyway, that's where he's at. Then he's seen, like, he's sitting in this chair. He's, like, taking calls, and he's like, oh yeah, so I'm just thinking, we gotta get this deal settled. Like, we gotta do this. And then there's a scene where he's like, oh, I'm putting on a couple extra pounds, it's the sedentary life. It's like a montage. But he's like, it's like the sedentary life. And, oh yeah, so it's cutting to, like, different phone calls, and then he's having one where he's like, so what'd you say you put in that? You put, like, honey, and you put, like, some spices and stuff, and it's good for weight loss. Okay, awesome. Like, I'll do that. Like, he's, like, a health nut, but he's also, like, doing all these sales calls, and he's talking with his coworkers.
And he has a little fuck-ass Bluetooth headset. It's very important.
And a BlackBerry. And there's also also there's one cut where he says, like it's, again, this montage of him, like, talking, doing different calls, and he goes, well, when is there going to be another show like Project Runway?
I was like, hello? Like, they just love a gay joke for Dean in this show.
No, it's crazy. So he's doing that. And I'm like, oh my god, he likes Project Runway and he has an eating disorder because he's constantly talking about losing weight. We love that.
And he listens to NPR.
And he listens to NPR. Oh god. Soy boy. Anyway, so he is, like, sitting there. He's on all these calls, and then his boss walks in, Mr. Adler. Mr. Adler, who is played by Kurt Fuller, which made me laugh because I forgot he was in this show. And I was like, oh my god, that's Woody from Psych. What are you doing here, silly? But he walks in and he's like, Dean, good stuff? And Dean's like, yep, can't complain. And he's like, all right, good job, champ. And leaves. So it's like, okay, we have this idea of, like, what's going on here. We see over the course of this montage, Dean has, like, a nice office, and, like, the window behind him is slowly getting darker. Because it's night. So he gets up to go and leave. And he gets in the elevator. And then a man in, like, a yellow polo gets in the elevator, and he turns around. And you realize it's Sam. And, like, the polo he's wearing has, like, the company logo on it. And they look at each other, and Sam goes, hey, I'm sorry, do we know each other? Like, I swear you look so familiar. And Dean's like, no, I don't think we do. And he's like, really? Are you sure? And Dean looks at him and he goes, save it for the health club. Which I'm like, what are you talking about?
And some things about Dean never change. Him saying inexplicable shit.
Yeah, but he is so rude, which was kind of hilarious. But Sam, like, looks very perturbed. Like, he's like, something's strange here. And me as a viewer was like, yeah, Sam, something is strange here. I don't think this is right. Then we get the title screen, Supernatural. This is such an iconic, crazy episode.
It's very much a, like, we have to like not reintroduce, but we have to, like, reestablish their characters. Like, this is who they are, and we have to put them in situations to show that they're the same episode. And it's many thoughts.
It's so good. And, like, the reason that this, like, happens, and, like, the figuring out, like, what is actually going on is so funny. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, why did they do it? Like, why did that happen? That's so stupid.
I think it's very similar to when Castiel sent... It's very similar to when Castiel sent Dean back into the past. And I'm like, how did you think that was going to help?
Like, yeah, that is something I feel on this show they're constantly doing. We'll get into that, because I don't want to spoil it. On a show, because we notoriously never spoil anything here. So we cut, and we see Sam, it's like the next day. Sam is sitting in this cubicle, and it's hilarious because this cubicle is supposed to be, like, small. There's a bunch of other cubicles. All these people are all wearing the same, like, yellow company shirt. And it's hilarious to me because Jared Padalecki looks like a fucking giant sitting in this cubicle. There's a scene where he's, like, kind of sitting to the side, and I'm like, oh my god, it's, like, unethical to keep him in this small container. Like, he doesn't have enough room or enrichment.
It's like an orca at SeaWorld, like...
Yeah, no, that's literally how I felt. I was like, oh my god, he's supposed to travel the lands. You can't keep him in here. This is not good. I need to protest. But Sam is on a computer, and his phone rings, and he has, like, the little headphone speaker, like the over the head speaker that you used to have, where it was like headset. A little one headphone and like a headset. Thank you. He has a headset on. Oh my god, I could not remember what that was called. But the phone rings and he answers and he goes, "This is tech support. I'm Sam Wesson. What can I do for you?" And he pauses for a sec. You hear like some mumbling on the other line and he goes, "Well, have you tried turning it on and off again?" "Okay, is it printing now?" "Okay, great. Anytime. Happy to help." And he hangs up.
Their names being Smith and Wesson is so...
No, I know. For those of you who don't know, Smith and Wesson is like a handgun manufacturer that was also like very involved in the creation of like the Winchester rifle. So it's just so...
I thought they were fucking slick with that.
Yeah. But also him introducing himself by his full name as a on a tech support line is fucking crazy.
So...
Like, working in a call center, I mean, it's not a call center, but it is like, I guess it's kind of like the call center of this company, like for the tech support. But answering the phone to a customer with your full legal name is crazy.
Also, I don't know what the fuck this company does, because I thought they were an architectural firm, but then there's a tech support floor.
Well, yeah, where it sounds like he's talking about printers.
Yeah.
And like printers and computers. But okay, but it is called Sandover Bridge and Iron?
Yeah.
So like...
It doesn't make any sense.
No, I had this thought a little later in the episode where I was like watching and I was like... Because there's a part later where Dean is talking to, like, another one of the employees, like, as a manager. And, like, they start talking about, like, bottom lines. And I'm like, wait, one of the guys he's talking to is, like, in tech support. Why is he talking to this guy about bottom lines? Like, Listen, don't ever ask these Hollywood writer wonks how real corporate America works. They just don't get it.
Also, you just said,
anyway.
Why is Dean talking to someone about bottom lines?
Well, we know why he'd be talking to someone about bottoming, but anyway. So Sam is working. Sam Wesson in his stupid yellow polo is working. And there's a guy who's sitting like in the same row as him, behind him, at another cubicle. And his name is Ian. And Ian is like, he's not wearing the uniform. He's wearing like a t-shirt and like not like almost kind of like a flannel, but not in a way that the Winchesters wear a flannel, in the way that like a nerdy guy wears a flannel.
He looks a little rumpled, I guess.
Yeah, definitely not in the same uniform as like everyone else who's there. But he leans over and he goes, "Hey Sam, I think that new hire, like, I think I need to hook up with her." And Sam's like, "Dude, that is not age appropriate." And he's like, "Sam, there's a MILF in there. And I need to get with her." And I was like, okay, I'm obsessed with this guy. Ian, he's my new best friend.
I love his mind.
Because while I think it is not good to talk about your female coworkers in that way, I can appreciate that he likes a MILF. Then he's like, "Come on, let's go like get a cup of coffee." And they get up and they have this other coworker, Paul, who's sitting there like scrambling away on his computer. He's like an older guy. And Sam's like, "Oh, hey, Paul, you want to come get a cup of coffee?" And he's like, no, like, I have to work. And Ian is like, "Dude, we get paid hourly. Since when do you actually like give a fuck about working this much?" And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry that I have an important job to do." So he's like, "Okay, right." They go into the break room and there's like a coffee machine and a fridge and like a little cabinet that has like supplies and stuff. And they're kind of like shooting the shit. And Ian opens up the cabinet and starts like stealing a bunch of office supplies and is like taking like pencils and putting them into his pockets. And Sam's like, "Dude, you're gonna get caught. Like, don't steal from work." And Ian's like, "Well, what? I was running low at home." And I was like, so true.
I used to do that all the time.
Ian.
All the time.
Who hasn't?
When I was a temp, I didn't have enough money for food, so I just stole all the free snacks from all of the offices. And then I would survive on Kind bars and stolen fruit. And it wasn't stolen because the food was for me. So, anyways, that's corporate justice right there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. But a little earlier, they were, like, right before this happens, they're talking about their coworker, Paul. And Ian's like, "Yeah, he's probably acting all, like, crazy because he thinks he has to work super hard because he got called up by HR. I bet he got busted for looking up porn at work." But yeah, HR busted his balls, so now he's working super hard, whatever. But now they're in this break room, and Ian's like, so, are you gonna tell me about your dreams again? And Sam's like, dude, you're gonna, like, make fun of me. I'm not gonna tell you anything, because you're gonna laugh. And he's like, no, dude, I'm always, like, supportive of you. I want to hear it. And Sam's like, okay. I had a dream where I saved a Reaper whose name was Tessa. And just, like, stopped the seal from being broken. And Ian started laughing in his face. And he's like, dude, this is, like, these dreams are so awesome. Like, thank God, he says, quote, thank God we got Harry Potter here to save us all from the apocalypse.
Oh, 2009.
Yeah. And Sam, like, rolls his eyes and is like, all right, okay. This is why I don't tell you shit. We also then see, like, Sam, they go back to their desks. Sam is sitting at his desk, and he's clearly kind of tired, and he, like, leans over onto his hand and closes his eyes, and we get to see a glimpse of, like, what these dreams look like, and it is just flashes from, like, previous episodes of Supernatural of, like, him and Dee, like, Sam and Dean hunting. And then Sam, like, flashes his eyes open and is like, whoa, that was weird. Anyway, so we cut. It is the end of the day. Sam and Dean are both going home from work, and they both end up alone on this elevator again together. And Sam just has such a lack of charisma in this scene.
They, like, switch places in this thing. Like, Sam is now the awkward one. It's so dark. And
Dean's normal, which we'll talk about sort of the meta of that at the end of this episode, because I have some thoughts. Because, like, wow, Dean is much more normal in a normal life, and Sam isn't. I wonder if that says anything about their characters. Anyway. So Sam is like, hey, listen, can I ask you a question? And Dean's like, yeah, you know what? Okay, shoot. And Sam is like, do you ever, like, do you believe in ghosts? And Dean is like, what? To tell you the truth, I've never really thought about it. And then Sam is like, what about vampires?
Something wrong with him.
No, Dean, like, looks at him like, bitch, what are you talking about? Like, he's like, why would you ask me that? And Sam was like, well, I've just been having these, like, really strange dreams lately. And Dean looks at him and he goes, you know, listen, I'm gonna do a public service and tell you that you overshare a lot. Anyway, there's also, okay, I also forgot in this scene, like, before when they're first, like, starting to talk, Sam goes, hey, like, can I ask you something? And Dean says, you know, look, I told you, like, look, man, I told you I'm not into... No, Sam goes, no, me neither.
No, because... Like, the number of times that they make a joke about these two being homos on this show is so many all the time. And Dean, immediately is like, oh, he's coming on to me. Why are you thinking that? Quickly.
That's because he wants a man to come on to him.
Yeah.
Preferably not this man.
Yeah, not this one, but... Yeah,
that's what he was actually going to say. He was actually going to say, I'm not into you.
Yeah.
Before he gets cut off, he's like, no, I love fucking dudes. I just am not into you specifically.
Like, there's something about you that I'm like, not really for me, and I can't really put my finger on why. Like, yeah, like, I don't know why. Like, they didn't need to include that. Like they don't need to, and you're just like,
it's
why?
So funny though, because it's a little, and you know what? I guess at least the thing I can say is at least they weren't super homophobic about it.
Yeah, they were.
At least it was like,
they were like, oh,
at least it was somewhat respectful.
People can be gay. Dean's like, people can be gay.
Dean's like, people can be gay. I'm not. I'm definitely not, guys. I will take every opportunity to tell everyone I'm not gay. I'm into women.
I'm not gay. That's not me.
So he has this conversation where he tells Sam, like, he's like, you overshare. He gets out of the elevator. And I think it is I think it is the next day then. I don't remember if it was like this happened in the morning when they were coming in, or if this was like just like lunch break or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it doesn't really matter. I think so regardless, they are like, we cut back to Sam. He's sitting at his desk, and this was when I was like, holy shit, he's a giant. And Sam is like, we look down, and Sam is like drawing these like fucked up pictures on a notepad of like monsters and demons and stuff. And it's kind of hilarious. And then we see he's like on his computer Googling vampires. Which I'm like, he's literally Bella from Twilight in that one scene.
When he just goes like, I'm going to Google vampire. And it's so like 2009 like UI of like fake Google. Like it's so, I'm like, you're just Googling vampires? Like, I'm obsessed with his mind. I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah. The other thing I forgot is that he is, like, on a call while he's doing this. Like, he's doing, like, voiceover where he's like, yep, try turning it on and off again. No, it's okay, I'll wait. Okay, is it working now? Great. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. But he's also, like, Googling vampires and looking at, like, pictures of people, clearly costumes of vampires on the computer. And it's so good. It's so funny.
So weird.
I love him so much. Sam, this episode really just, like, reminded me how endeared I am to him. So then Ian, his friend, like, looks over at him and he's like, hey, did you get an email from HR? And Sam's like, oh, no, I didn't. Why? And he's like, damn, it must just be me then. And Sam's like, oh, well, they're probably about to bust you for stealing stuff from work. And he's like, well, whatever. Nah, I'm sure that's not it. But it's in room, like 1444, so I guess I'm gonna go to that. And then that guy, Paul, the older guy, who was having issues the other day, who was, like, working super hard, starts being like, no, and is getting super agitated. So Sam, like, stands up and looks over and is like, hey, like, Paul, are you okay? And Paul's like, no, my computer froze. And Sam's like, yeah, they're junk and they don't get new ones ever. They freeze all the time. And he's like, no, but it's, like, all my work from today. And Sam's like, well, it's okay. Like, didn't you do a backup? And he's like, no, I wish I did a backup, but I didn't do a backup. And he's like, hey, Paul, it happens. It's not that big a deal. And Paul is, like, freaking out. And Sam's like, okay, like, clearly there's nothing I can do to diffuse this situation. And we see Paul sitting there, like, trying to restore these files. Then it's dark. There's no one else in the office except for Paul. So it's later in the evening. And he is, like, doing all this stuff on the computer, trying to find, like, any backups of his data or figure out, like, where his work from that day went. And then he notices, like, there's all this, like, tech jargon on the screen that's like, oh, look, he's coding, doing whatever. And in the bottom it says, like, no files found. And he gets this, like, just somber look of a man who's facing the gallows in his face. And he gets up and he's like, I failed. He walks into the break room, he pops open the microwave and starts pulling the tips off of a plastic fork and puts it into the safety latch so that it, like, registers the microwave as being closed. And then he turns it on for a minute and puts his head in and it starts sparking and he starts, like, screaming and smoking. So that's crazy. Maybe, I think it might have been longer than 1 minute because I think, you know, I did Google it because I was like, this certainly can't work. And most of the way that, like, what I found is that microwaves work specifically because the door is closed. So the door is, like, coated with special metal that I'm sure someone who knows more about science would know about. But basically, You kind of, like, can't do that unless you're in there for, like, a really, really long time.
Yeah,
and even then,
it didn't make
it's
a
like,
lot of sense. I was like, what? Of all the ways to
Shurley,
go? Okay.
He's like a modern Sylvia Plath.
Please.
Sorry, that was fucked up. But anyway, it's not important. I'm not trying to be Cinema Sins. I was just in a nitpicky mood. This is one of those things where I'm like, this is a common Supernatural network TV moment where they're like, this doesn't really work, but it looks cool. And it was someone's idea. It's creative. So we see it's the next morning. Everybody is, like, gathered around, like, the front of, not the front of the office, but, like, inside of the building around, like, the entrance to this break room. And we see Sam watch as this, like, as they're wheeling his body out. And then we see Dean is standing, like, on the other side of the door with a couple people looking over, and, like, Sam and Dean make eye contact, and then Dean kind of looks away. And Dean says to, like, a random other employee who's standing there, he's like, something about this, like, doesn't feel right. And the other employee's like, yeah, tell me about it. Nothing about this feels right. I'm never eating popcorn again.
What is it with people in this show and quipping?
No, it's so... I love it, though. You know, the MCU wanted to be them.
Literally.
So then we see, we see Dean back in his office, and he pulls up Paul's, like, employee file, and pulls up, like, a section about, like, notes about him, and sees he was gonna retire in 2 weeks. And is like, huh. Like, that's really weird. And then we cut to Sam, who's back in his little tech support office, and he wheels back and starts talking to Ian. And we notice, like, Ian is wearing the company shirt, which he had not been wearing. And Sam is like, isn't it weird that Paul would kill himself 2 weeks before retirement, and that he was so, like, dead set on working? Like, it's crazy. Like, you would think that the guy would be on cloud nine because he's about to get out of here, about to be free. And Ian is, like, kind of not really responding. And Sam's like, Ian? And Ian turns around and is like, Sam, I'm trying to work, so, like, please stop distracting me. And Sam was like, well, dude, I mean, HR really, like, really go crazy on you? Like, you're wearing the polo and everything. And he's like, Sam, I have a very important job to do, and it's very important that I get this done. So you should be doing that too. You should be going back to your work. And he's almost, like, in a state working. So Sam's like, oh, this is, something's weird.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
Yeah. And then they're talking, right? And Ian's getting, like, frustrated. And then Ian gets a message that's like, oh, well, now I have to go to the manager's office. So, great. So Ian gets up and walks into Dean's office. And I don't know why someone in tech support would answer to the sales and marketing chair, but regardless, this company doesn't make sense. So he goes to Dean's office, and Dean is like, oh, hey, so you filled out this form a couple days ago, and there were, like, a couple problems with it that just need to be fixed, you know, so that we can get this order out. And he's like, oh no, I did this, I'm so sorry, I hurt the company, I hurt the bottom line. And Dean's like, oh hey, like, it's literally not a big deal, it'll just take a couple minutes, so if you could just fix it, that would be wonderful. And he's like, no, I messed up, and becomes, like, super, super agitated and really upset. And he's like, I failed the company. And Dean keeps being like, oh my god, like, dude, calm down, you're okay. And Ian turns around and, like, storms out of the office, and Dean's like, Ian, hey, dude, like, what's going on? So he gets up and follows him into the bathroom, and Ian's looking at himself in the mirror, and Dean's like, hey man, like, I promise it's okay, like, let's calm down for a sec. And then Dean exhales and realizes, like, he can see his breath, which is crazy because that was something that happened when Paul killed himself. You could also see his breath. Ian looks over to him, and all of the faucets in the bathroom, the automatic faucets, like, turn on, and the soap dispensers all turn on, and Dean is like, okay, Ian, you know what? We should get out of here. Like, this is not right. Something fucked up's going on. Let's just get out. And Ian looks at him, pulls out, I think it's a pen. It might be a pencil. But regardless, pulls out something and stabs himself in the neck. Like, really, really hard. And blood starts spurting out. And Dean's like, oh my fucking God, what? And he rushes over to, like, help. He looks up into the mirror and sees this, like, extremely old man who also looks kind of like in, like, old-timey clothing, like early 20th century vibes. And, like, he looks back behind him and he's not there. And then he looks down and, like, Ian's bleeding out. So he's like, okay, I can't focus on that. Yeah. And then he starts screaming and he's like, oh my God, like, someone help. This is, I would say this is actually, like, a pretty well-constructed scene. Like, the stress is very palpable, and I'm like, listen, I feel like everybody who's worked basically any job ever has had a moment where you're like, oh, I fucked up. And, like, sometimes it just gets to you, even though you're like, okay, it's not that big a deal. But, like, I feel like everyone's had that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I've been in this guy's exact position. I will say I only thought about doing what he did, but I didn't do it, so everyone clapped, but we've all been there. So that's the tea. We then cut. The police are there. They're talking to Dean, and they're, like, wheeling his body out. Sam is also standing in the hall. Sam watches, and he looks over and sees Dean, and the police are like, so what happened? And he's like, well, I followed him into the bathroom and he was there, and he looks like he pauses for a second. And we as the audience know he's thinking about that fuck-ass guy, ghost he saw, whatever. And he's like, and then he stabbed himself with the pencil in the neck, and that's all I saw. I'm sorry. And they're like, okay, like, it's all good. We cut, it's like a little later, and Sam gets a call. He's back at his desk, and he gets a call, and it's Dean, and he's like, you need to come to my office now. And Dean's like, okay, so, like, who are you? Like, what is going on? Clearly there's something up with you. And Sam's like, just, like, out of curiosity, did you also start at this company 3 weeks ago? And Dean's like, yeah, that I did, yeah. Like, that's, like, the same time that I started.
Okay, that's also objectively wild, because it, like, seems like he's kind of a high-up executive who has, like, an established desk and everything. Like, I'm like, what do you mean he only started 3 weeks ago? Like, I don't know. It's nothing in this company makes
Brought
sense.
the nameplate with him.
No, literally.
Sam is like, why'd you call me in here? Like, did you see something when Ian died? And Dean's like, I don't know what I saw. No. And Sam's like, oh my God, like, you did see something. You saw, like, a fucking ghost or something. And Dean is like, I don't know. Like, that, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, he is clearly very hesitant. But Sam is like, listen, what if these two suicides aren't actually suicides? Like, what if there's something going on and they're related? And Dean, and he's like, I just have this instinct that tells me that this is what's happening. And Dean is like, he's hesitant, and then he's like, yeah, I have that same instinct. Something's up. So they both are like, this doesn't pass my smell test. And Sam is like, okay, so here's the tea. Paul and Ian both got a message from HR telling them to go to room 1444. And Dean is like, okay, first of all, how did you get this? Did you hack into their emails? And Sam's like, well, I may have used some of my tech skills to access some things. And Dean's like, okay, whatever. okay, I'm just not going to investigate that. But he's also like, HR's on floor 7. And Sam's like, right, that's what I'm saying. So they both went, and then, like, both of them were suddenly, like, super obsessed and, like, super driven to work really hard. So, like, something happened. Something was weird. We should go check it out. And Dean's like, okay, yeah, but you know, it is getting late. We should just go in the morning. And Sam looks at him and he's like, dude. And Dean's like, you're right. Okay, let's go now. It's so... They're dynamic when they're like... Because I think sort of the thing is, it's like, they still, something in them senses that something's wrong, and they still, like, interact with each other in a similar way as to how they did when they were, like, thought they were brothers. But there's something so fun about seeing them interact almost as equals.
Yeah.
Where Dean is not looking at him as, like, a little brother.
Yeah.
It's so fun. Their dynamic is so funny in this episode. So they go to the 14th floor, and they start walking to the room, and they see it, and they see inside, like, it looks like an old, like, tech storage room, but clearly no one is accessing it regularly. But they see there's another tech support employee who's in there, and he's, like, getting attacked by something, and they're, like, weirded out, because they're like, what is that? And then it's, like, it's that same guy, that guy who is dressed up in old-timey clothes, and the door, like, slams shut. So they run up to go help this guy to try to figure it out, and Sam, like, on instinct, kicks the door in. And Dean's like, whoa, that was awesome. So they run in, and Dean, like, grabs a wrench and swings it at this ghost, and it disappears. Because, as we know, as viewers of Supernatural, the way that you stop ghosts is with iron. But Dean Smith does not know that. So it was like an instinct almost. But the ghost disappears. So we cut. We're back at Dean Smith's apartment, and Sam is there, and he's like, well, like, this is a really nice place you got here. And he's like, oh, you know, thanks. And they kind of start talking, and they're like, well, what did we, like, Dean's like, well, that was, like, really cool, that move you did. Like, how did you know how to kick a door in? And he's like, I didn't. I've never done that before. I don't even, like, work out really, like, and that move with the wrench, how'd you know that ghosts were afraid of wrenches? And Dean's like, I don't know. It just felt like the right thing to do. So clearly they have some of the Winchester brothers, like, instincts. Clearly there's something going on. But they're like, okay, like, so we need to do something, right? Like, something about this is, like, fucked up. And, like, we need to figure out how to stop this ghost, because it's gonna keep, like, hurting people and causing them to kill themselves. And Dean is like, okay, well, the first thing we need to do is one of my favorite things, which is research.
No, something's deeply wrong. Something's deeply wrong when Dean is the one.
Oh, yeah. Another thing that happens, like, in this conversation is they're like, wow, like, we did such good jobs of, like, fighting, whatever. And Sam's like, don't you feel like you're, like, destined to do more than this? Like, something about this whole situation feels so weird. Like, I feel like I'm destined for more. Like, we are destined for more. And Dean's like, dude, I feel like most people who work in cubicles think that. and Sam's like, no, never mind. It's whatever. And Dean's like, well, listen, I don't really believe in destiny, but I do believe in research. So let's start looking into this.
Literally said, that's let's kind of research, mamas.
Mm-hmm. So Sam is like, okay, I did find this website that will help us, like, that's basically like an instructional video on how to stop ghosts. And it's, like, a really cool website. These guys are super informative. They pull up a website, and it's the fucking Ghost Facers. And it's is the ghost facers being like, here's how you kill a ghost.
It is quite possibly one of the funniest things Supernatural has ever done. And like throughout the whole video, they're just quoting things that the Winchesters told them. It's like, it's literally how the turntables. It's so good. Like,
yeah. So they start, like, they're watching this educational video of the ghost facers, and they're being like, here's how you kill a ghost. And it's like, first you need to use salt, because ghosts, it's like acid to them. And then you need to, like, hit them with iron. And Sam's like, oh, that's like the wrench you use. That's why that stopped the ghost. And Dean's like, oh, funny me. I'm so smart. And then they're like, okay, so then you need to, like, but that won't stop a ghost fully. In order to really kill it, you need to, in order to really kill it, you need to salt and burn the body. And if there's no body, then no worries. You just need to find a piece of, like, whoever it was, and maybe it's like a leftover hair in a locket or something. At least that's what we learned from, quote, those super annoying Winchester douche nozzles. And then, like, their video goes on a little longer, but they keep referencing the Winchester brothers. And Sam and Dean are not registering that at all.
It's so good. Like,
it's crazy. So I was just, like, not expecting a Ghost Facers cameo, but it made me laugh. So they start, like, going through, like, who they think it could be. And in searching, like, the history of the building, they find that one of the, like, that the founder of the company, whose name was P.T. Sandover, was, like, really, like, he died in 1916. And he was really, like, clearly, like, a big driver of business.
He was like Scrooge.
And,
like, yeah.
Basically. He looks like Scrooge. So they find, like, I think they find, like, an old picture of him, and they're like, okay, yeah, like, that's definitely the guy. And they're like, Sam is like, okay, so, like, the times that he has shown up in history are, like, the times that there have been, like, multiple suicides in the building were, like, 1929, and then there was no, like, maybe he shows up during times of, like, economic strife to try to, like, whip the workers into shape and, like, save the company. And Dean's like, well, you know, like, the worst recession since 1929, which was obviously the Great Depression, is now, because this is 2009, right, during the pop of the housing bubble, during the financial crisis. And also, Dean is like, yeah, I know, it's so terrible. I don't even want to talk about my portfolio right now.
You're like, you're what?
Okay, day trader. Not what a day trader is.
Day trader Dean
anyway.
is worse than Demon Dean. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. So, but Sam is also like, okay, you know what I did? Also, this building used to be only 14 floors, so it's 22 now, I think, is what they had said. But he was like, this building used to only be 14 floors. So what was on the top floor? Room 1444, which was the room that the HR messages were sending people to. So they're like, oh my god, like, there's, like, that's probably why he's haunting that room, why he's telling, because that used to be his office. And then Sam's like,
I need to shout out to this ghost, though, because not only is this ghost, we find out, powerful enough to physically touch things, this ghost is sending emails. This ghost from the 1800s has figured out how to send a believable corporate email. And is like, I know, I guess he's bored or whatever, but, like, this ghost can do way more. I mean, then that should tip you off that there's something odd here. But, like, this ghost can do a lot.
yeah. But, so they're like, okay, we need to salt and burn his body. And Sam's like, well, he actually got cremated. And Dean's like, okay, well, if that place was his office, there's probably some musty, dusty things left over, like maybe a lock of hair or, like, fingernail clippings or something. So let's go there. So they're going to return. Another thing I was going to say, this fool died in 1916. Fun fact. The Cremation Association of America was founded in 1913. And I believe there were like 52 crematories at the time. So he was like on the cutting edge of like cremation. He was a forward thinker.
I love how you Googled that.
You know what? I actually knew when that foundation was founded, but I did Google how many crematories there were at the time. So
wow.
I just want everyone to know I'm smart and I know how to do research, a lot like Dean Smith. So the two of them return to the building and they are going through all of the stuff, trying to find something. And given this is like a huge storage room at this point, so there's not really like there's not like his desk here with all of his affectations. But while they're looking, there is a security guard who walks in and only sees Sam, and Dean like hides behind something and watches this happen. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And Sam's like, "Oh, like I work here." And he's like, right. Tell it to the cops. Which is so crazy because like I don't understand why a security guard would be like doing this to an employee who works there.
I mean,
but
I guess the security guard might have also been possessed. I guess.
I don't think so. I don't think that was the implication.
I don't know. Also, the normal signs of ghost possession in the show are not there for other things. I don't know. Like,
yeah, this is one of those things where it's like the episode overall is good, but if you think about it for too long, you start to notice a bunch of like cracks in the foundation, and it's like, wait a minute. But I'm like, that being said, it was enjoyable, but because we're on a podcast, it's our job to tear it apart and be mean. So Sam gets escorted out by this security guard, and they get into the elevator to go to the ground floor while Dean keeps like searching this room. And then we cut. They're in the elevator. And there's like this is like one of those like elevators that they used to have a lot where it was like there's like a screen in the elevator that shows like what floor you're on and like all this stuff, whatever. And the screen starts like going fuzzy. And Sam kind of looks around and is clearly like, oh fuck, something's wrong. He breathes and you can see his breath. And then suddenly the elevator breaks down and drops a little bit, stops moving. And the guard uses his, like, emergency key to, like, override the door. So the door opens. And he's like, all right, let's get out. And Sam's like, what do you mean? I think we should just, like, wait for the technicians to come and help us. And the guard's like, last time this happened, I was in here for 2 hours. I'm not waiting. So the door opens. And it's between two floors, right? So he starts to climb out to the door that's on top. And this whole time, Sam is like, oh, this is fucked up. Something bad's gonna happen. The guard gets out and is like, okay, come on. And Sam's like, I'm not doing that. No fucking way. So the guard, like, who has already gotten out, leans his head back in and is like, listen, if you don't come right now, the clicking, like, the elevator kind of clicks, starts working again, cuts this guy's body completely in half. We don't see the front half, but we do see, like, his legs shaking and then go still. And then we see this explosion of blood onto Sam's face.
It's so, like, you know it's coming the whole time. Also, I don't know why the ghost does this.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It looked cool, though. And then Sam's phone rings. And it's Dean, and he's like, hey, man, like, are you okay? Like, I need you to come here. I found something. And Sam's like, I'm gonna call you back. Because he just witnessed this guy get killed.
It's so, like...
This episode, also, I feel like I've been talking about this episode for a long time, but, like, this episode felt so fucking long.
A lot happens.
A lot happens. So... And then we cut, and it's like, Dean is on, I believe he's on the top floor, like the 22nd floor, and he's standing in front of a bunch of, like, display cases that are, like, built into the wall, and then Sam walks up and he's like, all right, I'm here. What'd you find? And he's covered, like, his shirt is covered with blood still. And I'm like, how the fuck did he get out of the elevator?
Literally, that's what I was wondering. I was like, how did he get out?
I guess maybe because, like, the elevator started working, cut him, and then went to the floor. But it doesn't show Sam, like, getting out of the elevator, which to me was strange. Anyway, so Sam arrives and he's like, what's up? And Dean's like, hey, look at this. And they find, like, a display case that has these old ass gloves. And Dean's like, this are Sandover's gloves. Like, these are Sandover's gloves. We gotta bust this glass in and burn the shit out of those, because, like, maybe there's a piece of hair or a fingernail clipping or something on there, right? And Sam's like, all right, awesome. You want to do this? And he's like, yeah. There's a part earlier where in the Ghostfacers video, they were like, you can shoot a ghost with rock salt out of, like, a gun, like, with rock salt rounds. And they're like, Dean's like, well, where are we gonna get a gun? Isn't there, like, a wait period for that? So in lieu of getting guns with rock salt, they have brought, like, fireplace pokers, that are made of iron. So they are equipped with those. So
but also,
they, like,
he says, he's like, where would I get a gun? And Sam is like, doesn't he say, like, Walmart or, like, the gun store or something? Like, it's...
He says the gun store.
He says something stupid like that, and you're like, what the fuck?
I love them. I love this episode. Even though it's kind of stupid and, like, a lot of it doesn't make sense, I still love it.
So silly.
I must make it so clear, I'm having fun with this episode. So they go to, like, bash this glass in, and they do, and they reach for the gloves, and then suddenly the ghost is there, and he starts attacking them, and, like, throws Dean into the wall, but then Dean gets up, and, like, they start both hitting him, and when I say hit, it means that, like, it goes kind of through him and makes him dissipate with these iron pokers. And, like, he pushes Sam back, and Sam pulls out the, like, some kitchen salt, like, some like, kosher, like, little, like, the little tube of salt. And he, like, flings it at him, and he disappears. And it's, like, it's actually, like, a really interesting scene, because it's, like, clearly they have their Winchester instincts, but they don't have the actual, like, training. So it's, like, actually the way that they are fighting feels a little bit different.
Their Winstinct?
Winstinct is so fucking good. Oh my god.
I don't know.
So they're using their Winstincts to fight. And they're like, okay, they're fighting and they're winning. They're doing pretty good. But then the ghost kind of starts to get smart to like there's a point where they're standing back to back, and he kind of realizes it and starts, like, disappearing before they can hit him. And then he comes up and tries to grab Sam, and Dean tries to hit him, but then he turns around and, like, pushes Dean up against a wall and starts, like, chasing him down. And Sam goes to, like, go help, and then realizes that he, like, sees the gloves, so he runs over, grabs the gloves, sets them on fire, and as the ghost is reaching to grab Dean and, like, affect his mind in whatever way, his arm, like, catches on fire and he disappears.
Also, I don't know why he's, like, he has little electricity powers. You're like, wait, why does this ghost have this? Why is he this powerful? Why is Scrooge the ghost like that? Like, I, you know what? I don't know. I'm not gonna ask questions.
Also, the gloves burn blue, which is crazy, because I was like, why did that happen? And also the fact that I'm like, you have this cool effect of these gloves that you've set on fire are burning blue. Why didn't the ghost also burn blue? Like, that would have been cool as hell, but apparently they don't listen to me. They stopped answering my emails. So we cut, they are in Dean's office, and they're both sitting there, like, after the fact, like, holy fuck, that was crazy. So they're going back and forth about it, and they're like, oh my god, like, that was awesome. We did such a cool job. Like, we're so cool. We're the best. And Sam's like, we should just, like, do this. Like, I know I was talking about, like, what we're meant for, and I think this might be it.
Alexa, like, play What Was I Made For?
Stop. But Dean's like, whoa. Are you, like, saying we quit our jobs to become, like, ghost hunters? How would we live? Like, what would we like live, like subsist completely off of like diner food, make money from stolen credit cards? Like, you don't want to be going into a fight with a ghost with no health insurance. That's just like word for word what he says, which is so funny.
And this is before Obamacare, so that's real. Like, he can't even get on the exchange. And to be fair, he is legally dead, so
yeah, he might have some trouble applying for that.
Do you think that Zachariah had to forge a social security card for him?
You'll learn who that is shortly. But Sam is like clearly a little, like, feels a little dejected, but he's like, hey, I'm gonna tell you something. The dreams that I told you about, they were about me being a hunter and hunting these monsters. Well, they weren't just about me. You were also there. And Dean's like, girl, what the fuck? And he's like, no, you were there. And I think that might be our real lives. I think that something was done to us to make us like this, because this isn't right. This isn't us. I know you. I know this isn't you. This life isn't you. You're not some corporate douchebag. And Dean is like, you know what? You know me. We don't know each other. You know nothing about me. I think you should leave.
I love how, but the other piece is like, the other cool part about this is like, every piece of a Supernatural episode, which is like, oh, at the last second, one of the brothers saves the other brothers, and they have their little fight, and then they have their little emotional conversation. Like, all the little beats that are in every Supernatural episode are like here, but they don't realize it, and you're like, oh, I see what you're doing. I like the formula.
Mm-hmm. There's another thing that happens in this scene that I didn't mention, but where Sam is like, listen, when was the last time you talked to your family? Because, like, I'm like, when he's trying to convince Dean that, like, this world isn't real, he's like, when was the last time you talked to your family? And he's like, what do you mean? What are you trying to say? Of course I talked to my family. And Sam's like, well, I moved here 3 weeks ago after I'd just broken up with my fiance, Madison, and I tried to call her, and her phone number went to, like, an animal hospital. So when was the last time you talked to your family? And he's like, well, you know what? That's crazy. You don't know anything about me. And are you trying to say these memories are, like, not real? That something's, like, wrong? My dad's name is Bob. My mother's name is Ellen. And my sister's name is Joe. So I don't know. Like, I have a whole family. So I don't know. You're telling me they're not real either?
When he said my dad's name is Bob, I was like, oh, Bobby, the real father, confirmed.
No, literally.
Literally.
Do you think that means that Sam Wesson, his real father, is John?
Oh, that's so.
And he doesn't talk to him.
That's so sickening.
I can totally see. I can totally see why people want to write fan fiction about these two, not necessarily from the Wincest perspective, but from a, like, the lives that were constructed for these people is so strange and funny.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of obsessed with it. I would love to explore this world a little more, but at this point it starts kind of falling apart at the seams,
also,
right?
Joe Harvell confirmed to be a sister-like figure once again. We see it.
Thank Christ. But anyway, Dean is like, you don't know anything about me. Get the fuck out. So we cut to the next day, and Sam is at his desk, and his phone is ringing. It cuts back to his face, the pencil sharpening, all this stuff. And he stops, and he stands up, and he has the fireplace poker with him, which is, like, crazy. Did he just leave that on his desk? Whatever. But he pulls it out, and he starts beating the fuck out of the phone. And all the other employees, like, turn over and are like, what the fuck? Like, they're all watching. And he stands up and goes, I quit!
Obsessed with his mind.
Yeah. We also cut, and Dean is in his office, and he's, like, typing on his computer, doing his job. And his boss, Woody from Psych, walks in and is like, hey, like, how you doing? Like, doing good. I'm hearing all good things about you in this position. And Dean's like, oh, yeah, like, yeah, it's going okay. Can't complain. And Mr. Adler, what's the boss's name? He sits down across from Dean and grabs, like, a marker and on a sticky note writes down something. And then he hands him this note and says, how's this for a bonus? And Dean looks at it and goes, wow, that's very, very generous of you. And he's like, well, it's really quite selfish because I really value you as an employee and you're really doing amazing numbers and we want to keep you here. And, you know, you'd have to work really hard for it, but in like 5 to 10 years, I could totally see you being like a VP of, like, he gives like this long title that's clearly like a major like VP of the company. And he's like, you'd have to work hard, but I could totally see you getting there. And Dean like pauses and he looks down and he leans back and he's like, you know, I appreciate that, but I'm giving my 2 weeks. I realized really recently there's like other work I have to do. And Mr. Adler's like, other work, like for another company? And he's like, no, it's hard to explain, but I'm not supposed to be this person. Like something's not right here. And Mr. Adler starts laughing and he kind of gets this like knowing look. And he goes, oh, Dean. And he leans forward and taps Dean's forehead. And suddenly Dean's like whole body and like posture changes. And he's like, what the hell? Oh my God, I'm starving. Because if you'll remember, Dean Smith was on a diet. But Dean's like, oh my God, why am I wearing a tie? What's going on? And he looks up at Mr. Adler and is like, what is happening? So you can see this is clearly Dean Winchester again. He's back, baby.
Our boy is back.
Our boy is back. And Mr. Adler's like, well, welcome back. I'm happy to see you. And he's like, you just did the thing. You're an angel. That's what angels do. And he's like, yeah, I am. My name is Zachariah.
Wait, he literally went, apologies for the deception.
Stop, he did. But he's like, yeah, my name is Zachariah. I'm Castiel Superior, so after the whole, like, Uriel business, I wanted to come down and, like, get my ducks in a row and introduce myself, and Dean's like, well, I'm not one of your ducks. I am my own person, and I don't fuck with you guys. And he's like, listen, we totally fucked that up with Uriel. I'm so sorry about that. We are gonna be, you know, dealing with this, and we want to work together to, like, make this happen. And, yeah, so I did, like, put you in this situation. And Dean's like, oh, so, like, you made up an entire, like, fake company with all this stuff and whatever, like, to do what? What's your end? And he's like, well, okay, it's not a fake company. It's actually real. I just implanted you guys here without your memories and made everyone else think you worked here. So this is, like, a real company and a real ghost that they fought. So it's like,
Zachariah.
I don't know why he did, even after, like, having watched the episode, I don't really know why this was what he did to try to get across what he was trying to. But he's like, you know, I put you here so that you could realize, like, hunting's in your blood. That's who you are. It's not just because you're your dad's little soldier or whatever. It has nothing to do with him. It's because this is who you are. And if you'll recall, this was what Dean was talking to Cass about in the last episode, where he was like, I can't do this. I'm a disappointment to my father, and I'm a disappointment to your father, too. So Zachariah is here to be like, no, girl, it's not about your father. It's about you, because you served. And, you know, you are a hunter through and through. And, like, I know that, like, everything is crazy, but, like, you can do so much. And he says, quote, maybe even save the world, all while driving a classic car and fornicating with women.
Why did he say with women? Not fornicating with women. Like, much to unpack.
But he's like, yeah, so you're doing that. So your life's actually, like, way better than a lot of people's lives are. Like, it's not actually that bad. I know you're, like, hung up, but, like, you're kind of awesome. Like, literally, he's kind of hyping Dean up, and he's like,
Kim, there's people dying. Like, it could be worse.
Yeah, but Dean's like, I'm like, this is fucking stupid. And he's like, listen, this is who you are, and you could serve doing this. And he says, quote, you want to go steam yourself another latte or stand up and be who you really are? And then the episode ends.
It ends with be who you are for your pride. Like, it's so... It's baffling. Like, everything... These angels are really otherworldly beings because they do baffling shit.
Mm-hmm. No, I just am obsessed with Zachariah has to be gay, right?
Yeah,
because, like,
absolutely.
What straight person would think of this scenario? Like, of being like, ooh, I'm gonna put them in a little corporate moment.
Like,
that's so
corporate
cunty, right?
Like, yeah.
Oh my god. No, literally. Is Zachariah... Do you think he was like, I know this is gonna fuel the Wincest shippers? Is he a Wincest shipper?
Here's the thing. Like... Because the books are out there. We're going to talk about it.
Oh my god, wait. Guys, you might have Zachariah in your corner.
Of all the angels.
But I just think this is so interesting because I'm also sitting here being like, fucked up that Dean was the one who was much more content in this normal life. It's almost like the whole thing is that he and Sam should have just been living normal lives. And like it's very funny because the whole, especially from like here on out, the show is about like subverting fate and subverting destiny and subverting like what you were made to do.
Yeah.
So the idea that the thing to break them out of that, to be like, no, that's not like a thing that Zachariah said, this is so unlike you that it'll make you break out, was like living a normal life.
Yeah.
It was so, there's something there, and I don't know if I can quite put my finger on what it is, also, but there's something there.
It adds to the queerness of it all that, like, oh, this normal buttoned up life is not you.
Yeah. I also like the idea, okay, I'm realizing what it is. It's that he's put them in, like, I think he actually kind of masterfully crafted this world to be like, no, like, you're a hunter because this isn't the right job for you. It's like, well, yeah, of course, working at a shitty tech support job isn't good for Sam, and working as a corporate douchebag is not good for Dean. Like, imagine if you had put him in, like, another kind of situation. Like, we see this later on, like, with Lisa.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you had put him in a situation where he had, like, more of a normal family life, like, literally what the Jinn did in that one episode where it was like, what if they'd never been hunters?
Because he's not giving he's not giving them their desires. He's trying to make a point. And he was being manipulative. And that's the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Also, all they had to do was put him in 911. Put him in the 118 and he'd be fine.
Dean, I think about the idea of Dean Winchester as a firefighter so often. And many of the girlies on AO3 also think about it, which is great for me.
Like, Dean and Buck are very similar. I was going to say, they both have a forgotten third brother. Anyways, we have to talk about the second episode, which is... If you thought...
This episode is like groundwork. Like, these are two like classic, like, integral supernatural episodes.
Yeah, foundational shit. And we have referenced what happens in this episode quite a lot.
I also, if I may, I think that there's two lenses that we need to use to dissect this episode. Because I'm going to spoil it. This episode is the introduction of Chuck Shurley. And Chuck Shurley now is like, he is a certain way. And then later down the line, they had decided to bring Chuck Shurley back. Like, he has an arc almost where it's like, he's in this episode, and then he's in an episode in season 5, and then I don't think you really see him again until, like, season 11.
I want to say.
And then regardless, there's a big chunk of time between when you see him, like, now. And then in season 11, for those of you who know, we've talked about Chuck a lot because Chuck is God. In the end of the show, they were like, Chuck is actually God and has been writing the story of the Winchesters, and that's what they've been doing.
And they're literally, literally fighting fate, which is referenced in the last episode, that's what they're talking about.
They're talking about Chuck Shurley. But the other thing, too, is that clearly when this character was conceived of, that was not the intention. Like, it is clearly not written as though he is God.
Yeah.
Unless they had some crazy shit that they were planning. So... which I doubt, because it's supernatural.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to examine this from the standpoint of, this is a one-off guy who is what they say he is in this episode, versus how this plays into the implication that the show has now created that this guy was intended from the start to be and know that he is God writing the story.
Like later on you're like, huh. Much like with Loki and Gabriel, it's like it wasn't meant to be like that initially, but here we are.
Yeah.
So this is season 4, episode 18, the monster at the end of this book. And we've talked a lot about Wincest today, and unfortunately we will be talking about it more. God help us.
This is the Wincest episode, guys.
Oh, God.
Welcome.
No. Okay, so we open with, there is a bearded man. It says in the wiki. It's Chuck. He is sleeping on a couch. He starts to dream about all kinds of weird things. He sees a motel room sign, a girl. He sees the Impala. He sees Sam and Dean. And then he, like, wakes up in a cold sweat. Or does he? I don't know if we see him wake up, whatever. But he has these weird dreams. And then we cut immediately to a comic book shop. A man in a Star Wars t-shirt is looking at comics. And then we pan to the cashier at the front. And Sam and Dean walk in, and they're in their, like, classic outfits. They're in, like, trench coats, they're whatever, and they're like, hi, we're FBI agents, and, you know, have you heard about, like, this thing, cold spots, this, that, whatever, and the guy's like, wait, are you guys LARPing? And he's like, and they're like, girl, what are you talking about? And he's like, live action role playing. He's like, this is, like, you guys are, like, really dedicated to this, like, are you guys LARPing? And they're like, LARPing what? Like, what? And he's like, oh, like those books. He's like, oh, you're LARPing as what are they called? They're called super. He's like, oh, and there's those characters, and he's like, yeah, they're like Clive and whatever. He's like thinking up names, and he's like, oh, and the two of them go, and they're like, Sam and Dean. He's like, yeah, Sam and Dean. And he's like, oh, the Supernatural books. And they're like, what? Huh?
This is so chilling.
It's so dark.
Imagine this happening to us. Imagine us, like, meeting up and going to, like, a store and someone being like, you guys are, like, based on that. Like, just, like...
No, because, like, it's objectively crazy so and fucked up for the Winchesters. And the guy, like, brings them over to the bargain bin. He's like, yeah, like, they kind of went out of print, and they really have a cult following, so, like, you guys are really, really deep cut, whatever. And they're like, huh? And they go to the bargain bin, and he pulls out the books, and it's called Supernatural by Carver Edlund, who is the producer of the show.
Jeremy Carver and Ben Edlund are the producers
Jeremy
of the
Carver
show,
and Ben
so it's a
Edlund.
mashup of their name.
And okay. Also, the covers of the books, they're like bodice ripper romance novel covers. Like,
yeah, it's like these two, like, there's this one guy on the cover of the first one, which they're like, yeah, this one's called Supernatural, The Woman in White, which is the episode of the first episode of the show.
Yeah.
Or the name of the first episode. No, I think the first episode of the show is called Pilot, but I think they call it The Woman in White.
Yeah.
In the book. But the guy on the cover almost just Fabio-esque.
Yeah.
He has this, like, long hair, and there's another guy who's got, like, short hair, but they're both shirtless.
It's so, like,
it's so funny.
And they start naming different things, and they're like, okay, we have to see all of these books. And then they cut to one part, and God, they're like, we need to see all these books now, because it's literally all the episodes in the first season. They flash the images, whatever, and you're like, oh my God, this is all the episodes from the first season. We cut to the motel. They are sitting there with the books. Dean has been paging through these books, and he's like, they got everything. They have When I Have Sex. They have the racist truck. I'm like, those are the two things you picked out.
He's also probably reading, like, early on. Here's a question, because it also looked like he was not, like, skimming through. He was, like, reading them.
Yeah.
Like, he was a decent chunk in. I'm just, like, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of Dean logging these books in his Goodreads or Storygraph and, like, being like, yeah, I'm giving this one was not very good. This one gets 2 stars.
That's for bugs.
This sucked. Literally, oh my God.
They make a joke about that
we'll
later.
Talk about bugs.
When we said that they make jokes about bugs later in the show, this is one of them. So They are like, okay, word for word, this is exactly what happened to us, down to stuff we didn't tell people. And then Sam's like, so get this. If you go online, there's a whole online fandom. This is the part where I'm like, should we kill ourselves?
No. It was like one of those things where I was like, this is kind of embarrassing to watch. Like, it kind of like, I was like cringing.
They made them say these lines. So, and he's like, yeah, there's Sam girls and there's Dean girls and there's Slash fans.
And hearing Dean Winchester say, what is Slash fans?
It's so, and only in season 4, mind you. Just letting you, like, what is Slash? And Sam then has to explain that Slash is shipping 2 characters together. And he's like, which 2 characters? Me and you? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, and he says it with the most iconic Supernatural lines, which is, they do realize we're brothers, right?
It's so crazy. Also, you know what's crazy? This is like kind of not happening in the show, obviously. But something that I saw, that horrible man, Misha Collins, was at a convention. I think this was it was a while ago, but I just saw this clip where someone who's like moderating a convention is like, yeah, like actually, if you look at the data, the first Dean cast, like first Destiel fan fiction was published like 14 minutes after the first episode with him in it, like after Lazarus Rising. It was like 14 minutes after. And Misha Collins said something to the effect of like, what took them so long? Like, he's like, was their computer not working? Or, and I'm just like, imagine. And this will come up later in the show, which is crazy because that is relevant to later in the show. But I'm like, I wish that those books were currently being published in this point, in this timeline, because I would like the idea of a scene, an alternate scene where Sam is like, yeah, and then there's like a lot of you and Cass. And he's like, but we've only known each other for like a couple months. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of like, honestly, I tried to like look it up and my computer's like, the fan's going crazy. It's on fire.
Like, I just think Chuck just didn't tell them about the Destiel fanfiction.
Well, he hadn't written those books. Well, he had written
those
books.
He had.
They hadn't been published.
Yeah, so this is where our Wincest is canon and supernatural in not the way that you think.
Ugh. That's so... Here's my question. Do you think that Sam or Dean has ever read any Wincest fan fiction? Because I feel like if someone had written fan fiction about me, regardless of what it was, I would want to read it just to know.
If it was with my sibling, fuck no. I'd rather kill myself.
You see, that's because I'm an only child, but I just feel like I would have to know.
Yeah, no, I'd rather die, actually. Yeah, so, they're like, okay, well, I can't find anything about this author online, so it's gotta be a pen name, so how are we gonna figure that one out? And I'm like, yeah, how are you gonna stalk this person's pseudonym? But they end up tracking down this, like, small publisher. It's this just woman in her house, and...
Yeah, and she was Mother Superior from Once Upon a Time, also known as the Blue Fairy, so...
The whole time I was like, oh my god. And this woman is like, she has a real fuck-ass bob. She's really giving 2000s bob, and they are talking to her, and she's like, yeah, these books, they didn't sell that well, so we stopped publishing them. All that people want to read now is romance, like Dr. Sexy MD. That's gonna be relevant later, considering that Dean Winchester says that he's a fan of Dr. Sexy MD.
You know, you'd mentioned in an episode of this podcast that Dean was reading Bodice Rippers because it was just like shitty and what he could find that he could afford when their dad would leave them alone. And I'm like, there's never been more evidence pointing to that theory being correct. But that being said, Dr. Sexy is also a character in a TV show in this universe.
Which means that there's, like, licensed erotica about him. I'm fascinated by this.
We need to get into this. This is the real questions we need answered. Can someone who's going to a convention please ask somebody what the lore is?
Yeah.
Give a detailed explanation.
Yeah. So she's talking about, and she's like, yeah, like, but I love them, whatever. And so they're posing as like they're writing an article about this. They're bloggers again, I guess. But they're like, no, like, we're really big fans. And she's like, I don't want you guys to like make fun of these books or whatever. Like, they deserve better, whatever. And they're like, no, like, we're really big fans. Just trust us.
Yeah.
And
they're like our blog entry will make this, will really blow these up. And she's like, yes, maybe we can start publishing again.
And she's like, I don't know if I trust my boys with you or whatever. And so she starts like quizzing them, like a man when he meets a woman asking about Star Wars. Like, she starts quizzing them, and she's like, what's Dean's favorite song? What's the model of the car? What's this, that? And they're all answering whatever. And she's like, all right, impressive. And at one point, Sam, like, she's like, oh, like, what's Sam's birthday? And he's like, oh, Sam's birthday is whatever. And she's like, okay, like, you know your stuff. And she's like, I don't know. And they're like, hey, like, can you tell us, like, who the author is? And she's like, no, like, he's really private. He's like J.D. Salinger. Like, no, like, I can't give away that information, whatever. And like, you don't understand. Like, we're really big fans and whatever. And so then and Sam goes, he's like, oh, we're really big fans. And then he unbuttons his shirt and shows her the anti-possession tattoo. And then he's like, Dean, like, show her. And he's like, fine. And she's like, oh, damn. And then she stands up, turns around, and shows them a tramp stamp that she got that is also supposedly a supernatural tramp stamp. They don't show it, but like, whatever. And they're like, she's like, oh, like, you get it. She's like, okay, I'll tell you. It's this guy. His name is Chuck Shurley. So we cut to Chuck is in his apartment. He is in a robe. He is struggling at his computer. He is writing, and and what he is writing is that the brothers look at each other and they knock on the door, whatever. And then lo and behold, what happens? That's exactly what's happening outside. And then he's like, and the doorbell rings. And then the doorbell rings. And he goes to the door, and who introduces himself but Sam and Dean. And he's like, oh, girl, not these fucking fans. And he like closes the door. And they're like, you guys need a life. And they're like, no. How do you know this shit about us? And he's like, stop, like, this isn't a joke, like, you are barging into my house, like, I don't believe you, whatever. And he's like, my name is Sam Winchester, and my name is Dean Winchester, and this is Sam Winchester. And he's like, wait a minute, I never put their last names. Wait, I just said Dean and Sam. Who the fuck are you people?
Which is crazy, because how the fuck, I don't know, the amount of times that their last name and like who they are is relevant to the story.
Yeah.
Is like, I guess maybe not as much in season one.
Well, no,
but like
he knows it himself. He just never put it in the book.
Yeah, but like it's kind of relevant to like the stories, like it being like, oh, you're John Winchester's sons, like you're the Winchester boys. That's kind of like the whole.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me that he wouldn't put that in the book. Like, I'm like, that's so random.
I'm obsessed with his mind, frankly. So Chuck, your writing choices, much like the show Supernatural, this is where we're gonna get pretty meta. That's what this whole goddamn episode is about. See, this episode slays where the French mistake is not slaying. So he's like, how do you know this? And they're like, because you are literally writing about our lives. And he's like, this can't be happening. Eventually in this conversation, he's like, okay, so I wrote these books based on these visions that I've been having, and you guys are in them. The books end when Dean goes to hell, and then they're like, well, do you know about the angels, whatever? And he's like, how do you know that? I didn't publish that part. And they're like, oh, so you knew about all this shit.
And that's, so basically, like, just so that I can, just because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens is, Sam and Dean show up. Chuck's like, you guys are fucking crazy, get lives, which I think is hilarious because I'm like, I feel like more authors should tell fans to get lives. Yeah. Like, I feel like we need more of that in the publishing industry.
Yeah.
He said, I strongly suggest you get a life. So Chuck is like, that's crazy. They are like, no, we're Sam and Dean Winchester. And he's like, wait.
Yeah.
I think I created you guys. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I put you through, he says at one point, he says, Sam is like, you didn't create us, Chuck. Maybe you're having visions or you're a psychic or something. And Chuck goes, did you really live through the bugs?
Yeah, this is where they talk about the bugs, and like, they're like, yeah, it sucked, and he's like, oh, holy shit, like, yeah. So he's like, did I like make that? I'm like, am I causing this? Whatever, and
he also says at this point, well, obviously, I guess, you know what? I guess this means, obviously, I'm a god. This must be what it means.
And this part is crazy. If you know what happens later, which is that Chuck is God, or at least he becomes the vessel for God, or God...
No, he's not. Okay, I did some research into this.
Okay.
Chuck is God and has appeared in this form as God to other humans on Earth and to other people. So, like, he is fully God in this moment and knows it.
Which is so... Which means he's
crazy
fucking with them the whole time.
Not intended. This was not intentional when this episode was written.
But it is intended later that retroactively this is what's happening, which is a wild way to watch this show. It's literally him existing in the context of all in which you live and it came before you. Like, that's... So that's the other part of this that's crazy, is that this is God play acting.
Mm-hmm.
The whole time. And you're like, what the fuck?
Another thing that happens in this scene is that they're like, oh, well, like this is who we are. And he goes, oh my god, like, I just realized, like, in my most recent story, it's kind of Vonnegut. And Dean says, Slaughterhouse-5 Vonnegut or Cat's Cradle Vonnegut? And Sam is like, whoa, like, how do you know Vonnegut? Like, that's crazy.
You read? Like...
And Dean's like, I'm literate. Beating the illiterate allegations. But then Chuck is like, more like Kilgore Trout Vonnegut in the way that I like wrote myself into this story and wrote my characters confronting me. So fuck. And they're like, okay, so like you have stuff written, like do you have stuff for the future written? And he's like, okay, so
yeah, which is also crazy.
You guys are, he's
also like, crazy considering that it's God, because then you're like, because then they confront them later. Like, that's so fucking... It's so...
Yeah.
It's so...
But but it's so funny because they're like, so wait, like, do you have anything for later? And he's like, you're not gonna like it. And they're like, okay, but like, tell us anyway, we can handle it. And he's like, okay, so T.
Yeah. So, and he's like, so he pulls out what he has written. He's like, so... Sam and Lilith have a night of fiery passion, and he like, and the way that it is written, whatever. And Sam and Dean are like, "Girl, what?" And Sam's like, "I would not fuck her. What are you talking about, huh?"
He literally starts laughing, and then he's like, "Oh, like, yeah, you guys are not laughing."
And then at one point, Dean's like, "Wait, wasn't she possessing the body of a child?" And he's like, "Oh no, like she's in the body of like a adult woman now. It's fine." And Sam's like, well, I mean, it's still not fine, but like, you're like, what the fuck?
What is going on? The amount of logical hoops getting jumped through is crazy.
It's so crazy. And so they're like, well, we don't want that to happen. Like, what do we do? And then hence comes the conflict of the episode. Sam's like, I think we're gonna have to confront Lilith, and Dean's like, girl, we are not prepared for that. We are fucking leaving. Which is the most sensible thing I think he's ever done. And he's like, okay, we are going to do the opposite of everything that Chuck has said is going to happen.
This is this part where there's a wonderful scene where these two are at a laundromat, and Dean is like, has like Chuck's manuscript and is like reading it as Sam is doing things. And Sam's like, this is like fucked up for real.
And he's like, you just thought I was fucked. A douchebag. And he's like, oh my god, like this is crazy.
So they're like truly like in it. They're like, oh fuck, he's like 100% right.
And then I believe this is when they go to a diner also, and they have a whole scene where Dean's like, instead of ordering a bacon cheeseburger, I'm gonna get a tofu thing or whatever. And what we notice here is that even though they are trying to change their fate, it happens anyway. So he orders like a tofu vegan burger, which is something Dean would never do, but then they give him the wrong order or something like that. Like that happens, and it's very, if can you change fate? That's what the show's really about.
Yeah.
Maybe. See, this is when this show kind of cooked. So they go to a motel room and they're like, this is not the motel that he said in the vision. But it ends up it is being the hotel that he said in the vision. It's just that the lights, the name on the neon lights, like some of the neon lights go out, and it's like that's what it said in the vision. And
he was like, oh, it's in the red motel. And Dean's like, okay, well, fuck that. They try to leave town, and, like, the bridge to get out is collapsed, so they have to stay. So then they go to this motel, and Dean's like, okay, this motel, I think it was called, like, the Troubadour or something. Yeah. And they're like, okay, like, we're just gonna stay here. And then you see, like, the neon that says Troubadour starts flashing, and then only R.E.D. is still there.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, shit. So it's very... So they're like, okay, we're going to surround ourselves with hex bags. We're going to hide Sam from Lilith, blah, blah, blah. And then, so then the next part is that the Chuck's manuscript said that Dean was driving around all day. So Dean's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to park the car and then come back and whatever. So he leaves.
Another thing that it had said is that he's driving around and that there's like a tarp attached to his car.
And that the back window is blown out. And he's like, I would never do that.
And he has, like, pink flower Band-Aids on him at one point. And Sam's like, dude, I've seen you literally, like, bleeding out and you use duct tape to fix it. There's no way that you would have a pink flower Band-Aid. This dude's a hack. Like, Sam low-key thinks, like, he's just a psychic. He doesn't actually, like, seriously know this. Like, this is not that big a deal. And Dean's like, no, we don't fuck with this.
Yeah, Dean's like, okay, so... Sam is left alone, and immediately, I believe he called Chuck, and Chuck comes to visit him at the motel. And he's like, listen, so do you know about the other things I was doing? And Chuck is like, yeah, so I do know about the demon blood stuff, and I didn't put it in the book because I thought it would make you a little less sympathetic. And he's like, what do you mean less sympathetic? And he's like, well, it's drinking blood. Like, it is wrong and gross. And he's like, well, I don't have any other choice. How else am I going to be strong enough to fucking beat Lilith? Like, Jesus Christ. And I'm like, you know what? Let him drink a little, like, leave him alone. Damn, Chuck. And
let him take a sip. Let him take a little sippy poo.
Take a sippy. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, we see Dean. He is trying to avoid everything. He is parking the car. He's whatever. But of course, everything comes to pass exactly the way that Chuck says. So he gets hit by a van, which is what Chuck said would happen.
So he also, the reason he gets hit by the van is because he parks his car, walks away, sees people trying to break into his car, and is like, oh, fuck, stop, goes to cross the street and gets hit by a van.
Yeah, it's giving, like, isekai truck-kun. Like, it's so... And so then he's, like, groggy, and he's, like, waking up or whatever, and there's this woman, and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, my daughter is going through, like, a doctor phase, and this little girl has put all of these cutesy Band-Aids on his face, which I'm like, why didn't you call an ambulance? Why are you letting your child put the Band-Aids on him?
Because that was my thing. It's like, if she had just run out of the car and be like, oh my god, are you okay? I'm calling 911. Then it'd be like, okay, whatever. But clearly the daughter, who is maybe 5, maybe like 6, has had time to open Band-Aids and put them on him.
It's
fucking crazy.
It's literally insane. And you're like, what the fuck? So, of course, then we see Dean. He is driving with a tarp.
He looks over, because, like, the people broke into the car, so the back window's smashed. So he's like, fuck.
He has to drive it with the fucking back window out. So.
With a tarp covering it.
With a tarp covering it. I don't know where he got the tarp, but yeah. So.
He seems like someone who just has a tarp, right?
Yeah. So.
Tarp behavior.
So he drives to Chuck's house. Chuck is home. And he's like, you have to help me prevent this. Like, you have to help me save Sam. He's like freaking the fuck out. He's like, whatever. And you are withholding information. And he like goes to like threaten him. And suddenly, guess who appears? It's Yippee! It's our favorite angel, Castiel. And Cass is like, I would not do that if I were you. And Dean's like, girl, why? And he's like, so Chuck is protected. because Chuck is a prophet of the Lord. And he's protected by an archangel, so you would get your ass beat. And his books will one day be known as the Winchester Gospels. The visions he's receiving are visions from God. And Dean's like, what? And I will say one of Castiel's best lines is here, because Chuck is like, what do you mean? I'm a prophet, whatever. And Chuck is kind of freaking out. And Cass is like, yeah, Luke freaked out too, or something like that.
He's like, this is after, like, Chuck is like, oh my god. And Chuck, like, leaves the room because he's like, I need a second to process this. And as he's leaving, Dean's like, are you fucking kidding me? That guy? And he's like, well, you should have seen Luke.
Like, and you're like, all right, Cass, he's got jokes. Like, it's pretty good. And so Dean is freaking out, and he's like, we have to stop, like, Sam and Lilith fucking, like, what's gonna happen? And Cass is like, you know, what the prophet says is written down is gonna come to pass, like, no matter what. Like, that's destiny from on high. And I'm just saying, the Winchester Gospels versus the Book of Mormon as the next gospel of the Lord after the New Testament. I'm just saying. So we see Dean, he returns to the motel, and to find out, Sam has burned all the hex bags, and he's like, girl, what the fuck? And he's like, I'm gonna lure Lilith here. And he's like, are you stupid? And Sam's like, well, I can't resist it, whatever. And Dean's like, oh my god. And he leaves, and he goes outside.
Yes. Sam is like, well, there's only gonna be one way to find out if I'm strong enough, and it's to face her. And Dean's like, are you literally dumb? Are you literally like
are you stupid?
Do you have brain damage? Are you a moron?
And also, I was gonna say this earlier, and I forgot. If you know how we have a segment on this show called Pieces of Media That Are Better Than Supernatural That You Should Watch or Read Instead. If you would like to read a book that is about when the characters of a book become self-aware and the author is in it, you gotta read the Scumvillain Self-Saving System, because a lot of this happens in that book, and it's literally about, like, can you break fate, and what does fate mean, and what does fate mean. It's also really fucking funny if you've ever read any isekai or transmigration or anything, and the author also gets transmigrated into the series. It's a parody of a lot of, like, problematic BL tropes and stuff. It's great. Read Scumvillain. It's fucking fantastic. I think if you're a fan of Dean Winchester, who is super in denial about being gay, you will be a fan of Shen Qingqiu. You will be a big fan of him. You'd be a big fan. This episode is Diet Scumvillain. Anyway,
speaking about BL, I can't wait to talk about this scene that's about to start.
Speaking of BL, the scene that was about to occur goes in a Decibel top 10 hits.
When we were talking earlier about, like, clutching our pearls and being like, oh my god, get a room, it was this scene.
It's crazy. So Dean goes out to the parking lot. He is at the vending machine, and he starts to pray, which Dean doesn't do. And you know who answers his prayers every time? It's Castiel shows up.
Yeah, and it's so fucked up, too, because Dean is like, okay, fine, I'm praying. I need your help. I know this is, like, so embarrassing. And Cass shows up and is like, you know, praying isn't a bad thing.
And he says, oh, it's like a sign of faith or whatever. And I'm like, oh, yeah. What?
Praying is he says, you know, praying is a sign of faith, and, like, appears behind Dean. And Dean turns around and was like, you gotta help me. And I'm sitting here like, oh my god, this is the most romantic scene.
What is going on? So he's like, you have to help me. And Cass is like, even if I could, like, he's like, I can't, like, it's a divine prophecy, whatever. And, like, Dean is getting up in his face. And this is a big point where Dean is like, well, fuck God and fuck this shit, whatever. And he says, there will come a day when you need help and I won't answer. And you can tell Cass is upset by that. And you're like, they're, like, up in each other's face. Like, it is crazy. You're like, oh my god. And
my heart's racing just thinking about it.
It's so crazy. And they are like up in each other's fucking business at this point. And Dean goes to leave after Castiel is like, I can't do anything. I literally can't. And Castiel kind of looks a little mischievous. And he's like looking to the side or whatever. And he's like, wait, Dean, don't go, Pookie. No, he's like, don't go. And he's like, listen, if anything were to happen to the prophet, he's protected by an archangel. So anything that would hurt the prophet would be destroyed by that archangel. So I just want to let you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, I can't change anything. I'm so sorry, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But let's think about that. And then Dean is like, oh, he's trying to tell me something. And you're like, is Castiel? Is he rebelling? Is he giving his Pookie Bear a little bit of information?
If I rebelled, would anybody else want some? If I get some rebellion for the table, would anyone else like some?
It's so, he says, and Dean's like, oh, if I put Chuck in the same room as Lilith, the archangel will appear and destroy Lilith. And so he thanks Cass, and Cass is like, good luck. And he's like, bye. And you're like, look at them working together. And you're like, oh, should I go crazy? Should I be insane? Then we see Dean go to Chuck's house, and he's like, all right, you need to step the fuck up and come with me to the hotel. And Chuck is like, I haven't had another vision yet. Like, I don't know if this is supposed to happen this way. And he's like, I don't care. This is what we're doing. And he's like, he's like, I can't do that. Like, I'm just a guy. I'm like, literally, I'm just a little guy, which is crazy if you consider that this is God and he knows what he's doing. But if you don't, it's still crazy. And Dean's like, girl, I have a gun. You're coming with me. And Chuck is like, wait, if an archangel is protecting me, then you're threatening yourself. And Dean's like, well, who's a faster draw? You're like, damn. And Chuck is like, okay, fine. Like, I'll go. Back at the motel, of course, Lilith arrives. She is in a blonde waif's body.
I feel really bad. I'm hoping it's either, I think it's more likely one than the other, but I was like, either this actress sucks or the direction and lines they gave her are embarrassing to perform.
The lines are just bad.
Because, like, it was really bad. I felt bad because I'm sure the actress is fine, but it was just so stilted. I was like, this is hard to watch.
Yeah, I think.
Because it's also, like, I think they're trying to reconcile, because I read that one of the reasons that Lilith is now, like, an adult is because, spoiler alert, they knew that she was gonna be killed by one of the boys.
Yeah.
And didn't want the implication of them killing a little girl, which is like, okay, fine, but now suddenly they're like, it's okay that we can sexualize her.
You're like, it's okay.
And I'm like, okay, this is
much.
So they're trying to marry this characterization of having this very young voice when she speaks, not like just how it sounds, but like the way she talks.
Yeah.
But then suddenly being like, oh, she's in an adult body, and now she's like a sexual creature, so you know, it's just a very weird, stilted dialogue.
It's weird. It's weird. She arrives and she's like, where's the demon knife? And Sam's like, it's on the nightstand. Go get it. And she goes over to get it, and she looks under the rug, and she's like, you cannot trick me. There's a devil's trap here. And she destroys the devil's trap. And he's like, God damn it. And she's like, you got to do better than that. And she's like, hey, listen. And he's like, why are you here? And she's like, well, I'm here actually to make a deal with you. I'm here to offer you something. And I'll stop breaking the 66 seals. I'll stop the apocalypse if you and your brother die, if you sacrifice yourselves. And you're it's kind of selfish of you, kind of demonic of you to not trade your 2 lives over 6 billion people's.
She found out that she was not going to make it through the apocalypse, which is why she's offering this.
Sam's like, okay, like, fine. And what I don't understand about this part is her reasoning. She's basically like, yeah, I found out that Actually, none of this makes sense of what is her reasoning, number one, to be breaking the seals in the first place, but why she suddenly now wants to stop, and why she gives a shit if they're dead. I'm assuming because they are supposed to be the fated vessels for Michael and Lucifer, that like that would stop it happening, so that would stop her from dying. It's not, as we said before, some of these episodes really don't make sense sometimes, but she's like, that's the deal. And he's like, okay, I'll take it. And she's like, okay, well, this is where we get into some weird shit again. Both inconsistencies and being weird. Because, as we've seen before, when they do a demon deal, they often have to kiss the demon. But they don't have to, because we know in the show there have been people who've made demon deals without kissing someone. We have joked about John Winchester doing with the yellow-eyed demon. But, like, we know that there was, like, little girl, Bella. We know there's like other people who haven't, but then suddenly when it's one of the boys and there's a woman, they're like, oh, well, they have to kiss to seal the deal.
Well, Bella also made a deal with Lilith.
Yeah.
Like, that was who her deal was with.
Yeah. So...
And suddenly Lilith is like, well, hang on.
And so now Lilith is like, it'll actually take a lot more than a kiss to seal a deal with me who's so powerful, which I think is funny because later on when they do like a deal with like a really powerful demon like Crowley, and like, so they should have been fucking Crowley is what you're saying.
Oh, I wish. Also, I'm sorry, but like, now that we have all this context, is Chuck just a shitty writer? Like, I guess he is, because like, why wouldn't he put any of the context like in the story? I feel like this is kind of important.
And he jokes about that later, which is funny. He's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of a shitty writer. And you're like, okay. And so at this point, a lot of weird things happen. Lilith sits on the bed exactly as she did in Chuck's vision. And she's like, we have to fuck to make this possible. And she's like, oh, don't worry. The woman's body that I'm possessing, she's like down to clown. And you're like, is she? Like, is she? Okay.
Yeah, that was just like made it even worse because she's like, oh, she's getting hot and bothered. And it's like, ew. Hey, ew.
So seemingly Sam goes over to seal the deal. And he gets on top of her, and then he reaches over to the nightstand and grabs the dagger to try and stab her with it. And of course, she gets his ass. She flips him over, and she's holding it over him to try and kill him. And just as she's about to stab him, Dean and Chuck burst in, and Chuck runs in and is like, hi, I'm a prophet. I'm Chuck. And Lilith just like gets off of Sam and is like, oh, you have got to be joking. Be fucking for real right now. And the motel starts to shake, and Lilith is walking closer to Chuck, and Dean's like, it's no joke. Chuck's here's got an archangel on his shoulder. And the motel is like shaking. It's bad. It's whatever. And Dean's like, if you don't want to get your ass got, then you need to leave. And
there is a part too where Cass is like explaining to Dean like earlier what archangels are, and he says they're heaven's most terrifying weapon. So it's like he's basically been like, yeah, archangels are fucking insane. Like, they are so strong and they're crazy. Which also made me laugh because I was like, archangels are heaven's most terrifying weapon, and then it's Gabriel. Like, come on.
Gabriel. God. So like everything's shaking, whatever. Clearly the archangel is about to show up, and Lilith is like, you know what? Fuck this. And she smokes out of the body. And the vessel, the host, is just laying there. And then suddenly the shaking stops, whatever. The archangel does not show up. And the woman is passed out, and Sam and Dean, I think they're in the car, they're somewhere, and they talk about what happened. And Dean's like, well, did you consider it? And Sam's like, no. Like, obviously she would have found a way out of it. Like, because at one point in their conversation, he's like, you would have, like, wormed your way out of it. And she's like, I can't. Like, it's a contract. And he's like, no, she would have found a way. And Sam's like, didn't you not want me to like, you were trying to convince me not to do this the whole time. Like, why do you care? And Dean's like, I don't know. Like, I would have considered it. I don't know. And like, demons, they don't ever break deals. And he's like, yeah, I would have taken it. And Sam is like, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna kill Lilith. Fuck this shit. And Dean is like, oh shit, like Sam is on a weird revenge warpath now, and it's almost like their roles have been reversed. We get back to Chuck's house, and Chuck is alone. Suddenly, Zachariah appears. The middle manager of heaven, Zachariah, appears from the previous episode. And Chuck has just had another vision. He wakes up, whatever, and Zachariah is there. And we don't know what he saw, but he's like, shit, I gotta tell Sam and Dean. And Zachariah's like, I don't think you should do that. Which is kind of them giving their plot reason for why Sam and Dean don't know anything else happening, which is basically that he threatened Chuck, not knowing that Chuck is God, that Chuck is his boss. So that's hilarious. And Chuck, dramatic bitch that he is, gets up and goes, well, then I'll just kill myself. and Zachariah's like, we would just bring you back to life. Like, don't bother, girl. And Chuck is like, shit, like, what do I do? And Zachariah's like, you do what you always do. Right. And then the episode ends. And I just was like, why do you write? Like, you're running out of time.
Stop. Don't make a fucking Hamilton reference right now. I'm sorry. Chuck, so out of context, it is very interesting.
Yeah.
Like, to see, like, this character who is now stuck involved in this big story that he had no real...
Yeah.
Like, suddenly, I think the idea of an author who finding out their story is real and actually happening is really interesting. And I think, like, it's a really good idea of, like, well, the boys don't have free will, and then Chuck is also stuck in this, and he also doesn't have free will, but he's not even, like, the center of the story.
Yeah.
And then being like, actually, he's God. I'm like, that's fucking crazy.
It's insane. The show is insane.
Because it's like, oh, Chuck is having this really interesting moral dilemma about, like, oh my god, should he be involved in this? Is it okay for him to write these books? Like, what's going on? The angels are forcing him to do XYZ. Meanwhile, Chuck's like, and here's the real secret that they don't know. I'm about to reveal something about myself to the audience. And it's like he is giving the fucking acting performance of a lifetime.
No,
because clearly Zachariah and Kaz both don't know. And he's like, shh, don't tell them the surprise.
He's undercover boss. This is his undercover boss.
Literally. This is his Math the Radar technician era.
Is Chuck the original Math the Radar technician?
He kind of is.
I heard God was shredded.
Way.
I heard God had an 8-pack.
Mm-hmm. I also, one trivia fact from this episode, this is the first of, like, a series of, like, a very few amount of episodes where no one dies.
Really?
Yeah, because think about it. No one died in this episode.
Yeah. Oh, also, I forgot about this earlier in the episode when they were talking to the publisher woman and she was like, I'm a really big fan. She's like, yeah, and it was really hard for them, and Dean is just so strong and brave, and you know, and men aren't usually that vulnerable.
And so sad.
It's so sad, and men just aren't really that vulnerable with each other, and wouldn't it be great if they were, whatever? And she's like, you know, apologies to you guys or whatever, and they're like, yeah, okay. And she's like, and they always cry.
And she's like, when they cry is the best part. And, like, she starts getting all emotional. No, because here's the problem. She was so mean. I was, like, so real. I know that she will ship Destiel once those books get published.
No, literally.
I know that she is going to be... Do you think she's going to read about herself and be like, wait a minute.
No, literally.
That was me.
No, literally. I'm like, maybe Chuck is going to leave that part out. I don't know. Like, I don't know what, because
he seems like kind of a shitty author, so
we know that the books do continue, because the book Supernatural will come back in the show, and so will the fact that people ship Wincest. Yeah. It will come back.
Also, I do have a fun tidbit, and this is like, I can't find a source for what convention this was at.
Yeah.
But allegedly Rob Benedict, who plays Chuck, did talk about how he had, like, a meeting with Eric Kripke, and, like, was shocked because they kind of looked alike and have, like, a similar voice.
Oh.
So, like, Kripke, like, Eric Kripke kind of, like, worked this into Chuck's character.
That's so fucking dark.
And so it's kind of like, he's kind of, like, has a lot of aspects based on Eric Kripke, which is kind of fucking hilarious because there's a part in this episode where Chuck says, like, why would you write yourself into something as a prophet? Like, that would be, like, why would you write yourself into something as a prophet or as, like, a god? Like, that's crazy. That would be so arrogant.
Also, it's crazy how once Eric Kripke left the show, they made Chuck into God and made God the villain.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Also, Chuck apologizes to them and he's like, I'm sorry I put you guys through that stuff. No one should be forced to live bad writing. If I'd known it was real, like, I would have done another pass, which is so diabolical if you think that it's God being like,
yeah,
sorry.
He's such, it's so crazy because, like, I know that it's like, oh, you change your interpretation of a character when you learn more information. That's crazy. But, like, no, that's what you do. But I think, as we've talked about with Supernatural, it's like the show has gone through so many showrunners and so many, like, different types of plots and different stories that it's like, there's no way that that Chuck was they knew Chuck was going to be who he was. So it's like, it's such an interesting way to watch this episode with two different interpretations.
Yeah,
because it's like, wow, God really is an asshole. Or it's like, oh, this poor man.
Yeah, it's, I'm not,
like, he's either, like, the worst man, the worst thing ever, or, like, aw,
just a little guy.
He's just a little guy.
Chuck.
But it is crazy because I think there's something in Chuck's last appearance in season 5, because he does show up again then. There is something that because people were theorizing back when I was really into Supernatural. It was, like, at the end of season 5, I believe, is his last appearance until season 11.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in between that time were theorizing that Chuck was God because of something that does happen in season 5. And given it's been a while since I've watched it, so I don't remember exactly what it is. But there is a part where I remember him, like, disappearing into into some light.
Yeah.
And people were like, wait, guys, I think he's God. And then everyone was like, that's a hilarious theory, but you guys are fucking stupid. And then it came true, and it was like, wait.
It was kind of like the Supernatural fandom's Rose's Pink Diamond. Like, people are like, that's stupid. Wait!
Literally.
See?
Stop. Chuck Shurley is Pink Diamond.
I'm sure someone has written those words at some point.
That should be the episode title.
Chuck Shurley is Pink Diamond. Oh, this is, anyways, when he says no one should be forced to live bad writing, I was like, so true. Anyway, everyone read Scumvillain. It's such a good book. It's such a
no
good
one
book.
should be. Also, I do love, imagine being, because I think 2 people, it was a writing duo who did Bugs. So imagine being those people who wrote that episode and then being like, everyone fucking hates us. like enough that they reference how bad the episode was in other episodes of the show.
I'm looking at the co-writers of this episode. Oh, wow. So this person is a writer. These people started on season 4 and 5. Wow. Okay. All right. Okay, women. Do we have anything else other than Steven Universe references?
You know, I think ending things on a Steven Universe reference is perfect for a Supernatural podcast, you know?
There's something wrong with us.
But you know what? I have to say, we made it through these episodes, and thank you guys for listening, truly. If you want to hear, you know, more from us, want to stay updated, follow us on social media. We're at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr. You can ask us questions in our Tumblr Ask box or by emailing us. We're themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. Just as a reminder, we are trying to raise money for Mohammed's family to escape Gaza. We have a fundraiser linked in the show notes. It's for his daughter, his daughter Noor, and his mother Alia. We're trying to get them to at least 10K, and they're slowly getting closer. So if you could take a look at that, that would be amazing. If you enjoy listening, rate the show, leave us a review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, all the other places, everywhere you can leave a review. We appreciate it. You can also comment on our YouTube channel now, which is crazy to say. We're in our YouTuber era. Not really. It's just it cross-posts to YouTube now. So anyway, tell a friend about the show too. We always appreciate that. Also, we do have a Destiel fic recommendation form. Submit your fics. We love reading them. It's just for us, but we love them. If you want to hear more from us, we are also two of the co-hosts of RuPaul's Pod Race, queer Star Wars, but now other pop culture stuff podcast. It's super fun. We're doing some new stuff over there. It's a little different than what we've done before, so please check it out. We're having a really good time. And without further ado, we'll see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, and the supernatural business.